that's the art. That is the art of building great economy and game progression systems, because it's a balance between pleasure and frustration.
How do you make a game go boom in 2023? Hello and welcome to Growth Masterminds. My name is John Kassir. Today's a bit of a different Growth Masterminds. We're chatting with one of those people. He's a growth expert. He's been there, done that. VP marketing, head of growth, SEO manager, 20 experiences plus on LinkedIn, 20 years in games, sold his last company to Playtika, and spent the last 6 years helping brands and apps get big fast. His name is Elad Levy, and we're going to talk about making a game explode. Welcome, Elad.
Hi, John. Nice meeting you. Thank you for having me.
Super pumped to have you. Awesome. Okay, let's make some assumptions here. We're going to talk about making games grow, and we'll talk from, starting also to scaling, but let's
Okay.
make a couple assumptions. First assumption, it's a good game, right? We
Okay.
built it. It works. It's a good game, maybe even really good, possibly great, but let's not assume that, because, if it's like astounding and amazing, it probably grows itself. Maybe that's a myth. I don't know. But let's assume it's a really good game, so it's got potential. And let's
Yeah.
also assume we have some budget, a decent amount. Not we work, blow billions overnight budget, but we have some budget. Where do we
Okay.
start?
Well, you actually jumped through the whole part that is super hard, like finding something that actually clicks. But
You are allowed to go back in time. You're the guest. You're in
I'm
charge.
no, I mean it's okay. It's okay. Maybe that's a different podcast. But let's say that the game clicks, the KPI are there, and you will be chased basically by every VC on earth to like accept their money
Money in
because
hand, chasing you down.
exactly. So I guess that your next step would be to swallow market share as fast as possible, and you would need to double down on UA big time, like a lot of user acquisition and in every possible channel. And hopefully, you had a good foundation before doubling down on UA, so the data points and tracking is there, so you can measure it properly. If not, you
Let's
can.
not assume that. Let's not assume that. Let's
Okay,
assume that we built a game and we think it's fun and people think it's fun and it's great, but we're
okay.
kind of new to the growth game. What do we need to do?
So I
Cool.
will jump forward now and say you have
Awesome.
like the executive team and you have the data, the marketing, and you're starting to push money in UA to scale. Now,
Yeah.
your next most important tasks in games, and I'm specifically focusing on games that, let's call it game as a service, or games that live for a very long time, is to maximize your lifetime value out of every player. And the only way to do that is through live ops and CRM activity. Other industries actually call it CRM. In the games industry, they
Yeah.
mix it with live ops, but basically continue and automating content pushing to players, optimizing pricing, upselling, focusing on conversion, and continue to maximize lifetime value while working hand in hand with the UA teams to make sure that the channels that they bring tie back to those who bring the maximum value of those players, the best players, and not just the one that go in and out or churn very fast. So
How do
that
you
will that is like the biggest step, because the higher you maximize your LTV, your lifetime value, the more you can bid when you buy players, because you already know that
Mhm.
in, I don't know, 18 months that player is going to give me back, I don't know, $200. So you can compete on a completely different level, and you can buy really expensive if you want to. So that
Yes.
really
Yeah.
changes the game.
How do you work with live ops and product together, because your game, your app is always changing. You're adding new content, new seasons, new levels, new let's say ships or
Yeah.
weapons, right? new challenges, all that stuff, and you've got your live ops as well. So you're always fixing the plane or building the plane while you're flying the
No,
plane. How do those two things
think about
integrate?
it as a journey. And the beauty of having the right technology in place is that you can create new journeys for every new user. So, like, let's say that there's like new users that go through new journeys, and there are existing users that already go through some sort of a journey. And
Mm-hmm.
there are maybe players that are likely to churn or already churned, and you want to reactivate them, and that is another like treatment. But if you focus on those that love and engage and play the game a lot, then that basically has, you can treat it as like a completely different, it's a running product, it's live, and you need to continue feeding them. So if they're watching their favorite series on Netflix, you just need to continue pumping seasons. But if it's new
Yes.
users and that series is not appealing to them, you'll have to find something else to convert them and to hook them on to, like find another hook basically. The game will stay the same, but it changes a lot if the whole onboarding experience is different, if you're coming from this angle or from that angle.
It's really funny to hear you talk about that because I have one game that I play most of the time, and
Which one is that?
I have this continual fantasy, right? I have this continue. I will get good enough. I will have enough stuff. I will accumulate enough power that I will be amazing and unstoppable. But my win loss ratio in my battles is always around in and around 50%. Sometimes a little higher, sometimes 55. Sometimes it dips down to 44, and I think, oh man, they really want me to buy something now, don't they? And it's a mountain that you never stop climbing.
That's the art. That is the art of building great economy and game progression systems, because it's a balance between pleasure and frustration. Basically, those are the most successful games. Some days you're super happy, some days you want to throw the phone out the window. But
Yes.
that balance between pleasure and frustration, like that is what builds amazing games.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
if I built a game and it was all pleasure, that
No,
wouldn't
people
work.
will churn, and if it's too hard, people will churn as well. If it's too easy, they churn. If it's too hard, they churn. It's always like that. I mean, I see
Yes.
my mom play.
Yes.
My mom is 75. She still plays Candy Crush. She's like in level, I don't know, over 1,000 or something. She's playing for years. And she already learned, and she's really no computer or games expert, but she already realized that when she lets go when she cannot pass a level, she lets go of the game, and after like a few all of a sudden she can pass, because this whole thing is manipulated. Everything is manipulated. That's the beauty
She's
of it.
gaming the game. She's telling the game, "Hey, I'm not looking. I'm
I'm
walking
about to
away."
churn. Yeah, I'm about to churn. Do something
Yeah,
because I'm about to
exactly.
churn.
Give me something, do something. Oh, a
Exactly.
little tip for gamers here. You want to pass the next
Yeah.
level? Stop playing for 2 or 3 days.
Well, yeah, exactly. Usually in 7 days of no login is a funnel we call LTC, likely to churn.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're doing live ops. You're building the mountain that never ends,
Yeah.
and you're adding seasons and content and other things like that. So that's all working well for you. Talk about scaling this to a significant size. We're not just talking a small game. It's doing well. It's making you, low seven figures or something like that. Talk about scaling to the next level.
Well, this is where you need to be able to combine the whole thing, the whole 9 yards, technology and product and automation and UA. You need to combine and automate everything in a way that uh, you can pump more and more and more content Now, to do that is not that easy because even if you automate, you need a lot of people, and this is where the company starts really growing in the amount of people because more art. If it's a narrative game, oh my god, like the amount of like that's the worst. It's a content treadmill that never ends because you have to like continue writing and writing content with no end. And every that also requires rethinking the whole way you manage your R&D teams and uh, when you launch features, giving them more independence so the whole thing can be launched on its own, and doing a lot of automation. But this is really next level stuff, and when companies reach that size, most of the time the original CEO would probably not be the same CEO, because it's one thing to manage, I don't know, 50 people or 10 or 20 or 100, and then crossing 1,000 or over 500.
Yeah, there are some people who are interested in building stuff, and there's some people who are interested in scaling
Yeah,
and managing stuff. We talked a little bit as we prepped about AI, generative AI,
yeah.
and AI in other areas. Where can that help people who are working to scale their games?
I would actually go back for a second, and there are more ways, I mean, to grow. And some of them will take the same game, reskin it, and try to launch a similar game to, because you already have the engine. So you can do the same thing with a different theme and then capture
Hmm.
more market share. Some of them would try to do
Hmm.
that.
Another game in the Scapes series.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yes,
Yes,
exactly. And they're all great, by the way. They're all great.
yes,
Ton of art, ton of content, ton of like, there's a story. The game is not the match three. The game is the story and fixing things. That's the game
yes.
itself. That's the actual game. But yeah, which means more, UA and more playable ads and more everything. But some would probably try to do that, which is logical. It makes sense. Some would be brave and try to do a completely different game. I actually do not recommend that because it's crazy. I mean, if you specialize the genre, then you already know the UA numbers, you know the ARPDAO, you know all the KPIs. So if you launch a similar one, there's always a place for a second spot, or in the third and the fourth, and there's a lot of low hanging fruit, and you can make a version that is maybe you target with the first version the high paying countries, like the tier one countries, but you can maybe do like a third world country where you focus mostly on ads and not on in-app purchases. There are so many ways, and if you take content that is really amazing, for example, I know Angry Birds, they took the same content and squeezed it, and after running it on every possible device, they started making movies, and because you have an IP at that point, it becomes an IP, and that IP is valuable.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
there are very creative ways to continue growing. And
Good, 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 good.
about the
Okay.
AI, yeah, the AI point that you
Yes,
mentioned. Well, I I didn't really see. I see a lot of experiments, but all of them miss polish. I think that on the content generation, this is where it really, like the generative AI, you can say, that is where I see it helping the most. When you need to create, I don't know, more text or more art. I mean, let's take hidden object games, for example. That's one of the biggest nightmares in the games industry because content is so hard to make. If you can automate that, obviously that would be amazing. So there are a lot of opportunities. In
I see
Max
that
3,
quite a bit
in Max
actually.
3, we actually have a client that has like the whole level building is automated. So it builds the level and then it plays it to see how it plays, and and if it's good, it moves on to the next. So there's already
Wow.
like things that are out there.
Yes,
So
yes, automation that isn't necessarily AI. I've seen that in terms of generative AI, people creating objects, whether that might be a weapon, that might be a power up or something like that, and that's happening right now. I've seen a CEO who's spending $8,000 a month to give all of his or her, I don't know which it was, employees OpenAI, subscription to OpenAI, right? And said, hey, that, this is cheap, $20 a month for each employee, is just it's a force multiplier. It makes them more efficient, more effective, and get more done. And so I think that we're still early in those days, but I think that people are already getting some of those benefits.
yeah,
Do you see how do you see AI being used in user acquisition?
well, probably in the ads side, I mean, there's already automation that is used for
Mm-hmm.
years with different tools out there. But well, if in a magic, for example, in Dive, we currently hook up data insight back and feed it back to Singular to
Mm-hmm.
optimize UA campaigns. You could possibly put an AI engine to do the whole thing, but to be honest, it's really hard to trust a computer to do everything. You have to like supervise it somehow. So, I mean, it sounds great. It sounds really like a Skynet and stuff, but the bottom line is just you need someone to supervise it because if it goes crazy, it will just start, you know, creating campaigns all
Yep.
over the place and go wild.
Yep. 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 And you talked actually as well about just plain old hardcore data analysis in concert with product to see what's going on in the game.
Yeah, so I think there are several uh, steps in data. First, getting it right, like getting the foundation right, because if the data is inaccurate, everything you build on top of it is just we call it garbage in, garbage out. That's like the insight you
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that you get.
Mm-hmm.
But if the data foundation is clean and organized, then you can start getting the first insight with the data analyst working back to back with a good product manager and optimizing, like, let's check this feature, let's check that feature, let's see how the users that, I don't know, correlation, that's something that I love doing a lot in games, like the users who completed like this achievement on the second day, what did they do in the days after that? Did it lead to more
Mm-hmm.
engagement, to more sessions, to more revenue? So there's a lot of work that can be done with a couple of people that work a lot of hours in the same office
Mm-hmm.
or Zoom call or whatever you call it. And then the next step after that would probably be machine learning, mostly recommendation engines and regression analysis, where you try to predict models like churn or predicting paying users, because even if you can predict something that eventually lead to a more engaged user, then that is
Mm-hmm.
enough to feed it back to the UA engine and optimize it based on that, instead of the boring, like when you do UA today, it's super boring. It's like either installs or revenue, and those who really like take it to the next level, big companies, growth, that's what you ask, growth, they like start feeding custom events, custom actions back to the UI, back to Google, back to Facebook, back to the UA channel, so that they can optimize according to that, because they found a correlation of people that use this weapon end up playing more time a day. Why? I don't know. That's what the data said. But there's a
Do
ton
you
of things that you
often
can do with
find?
machine learning and prediction and tying it
Yeah.
back to the game or to UA, or yeah, lots of things.
Do you often find it's some of those correlations of things that you wouldn't have thought of. It's the non-obvious sort of KPI. It's the one that why does that work? It's often those things that are most predictive.
To be honest, most of the time you do something and you have no idea how it's going to affect and what it is going to affect exactly. Like it can be a button, it can be a color. 20 years ago, we used to A/B test colors, So
Yes.
I know red would be, I know it's an alert color. Uh, Blue is relaxing, green is like go for it. But then I don't know, red would be in one country would like be one thing, in another country maybe it would be another thing. So the whole world of data, insight, and personalization is so huge that when you get to AI, for me, it's like so much down like the road. There's so much work before that to be done that, uh, and most of the big companies, most of the data team is busy on that. And then you maybe have like a small team
Mm-hmm.
that is doing the AI, the fun stuff that,
Okay.
maybe don't move the needle that much of the company, but it sounds good on podcasts and conferences.
Yeah, sounds good on the podcast, looks good in
Exactly.
the investor deck, all that
Exactly. Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
suspect that will shift as we're seeing massive innovation in AI, but of course, there's always a lag effect between shiny new tools and productive application of
Exactly.
those in
Exactly. Yeah.
operational scenarios.
Exactly. Exactly. It's one thing on to
Yeah.
like it's one thing is the buzz, and then another thing is how really useful it is. So it's
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It takes
Mm-hmm.
time for it to sink, and it will probably sink at some point because the early work is really amazing. But I don't know. I mean, if you're a small to mid-sized game studio, I don't know if it's good for raising funds, but it's a completely different story when you get to like you can generate text and content, but it's I know maybe you'll go over it and there's like typo mistakes or or
Mm-hmm.
the content
Mm-hmm.
is irrelevant, or it's small things that when someone is very engaged with the product, he will find those details super fast. Like if you watch your favorite
I
series on Netflix and they would do something like an I don't know, computer
making
would
the script.
generate a new computer or change something, you would, hey, that doesn't make sense. You will notice in
Yes,
a second,
yes, yes. I will say this, that ChatGPT by OpenAI is pretty amazing,
It is, I
and
know, it's
whatever
fun.
I've seen, I'm a subscriber, and whatever I've seen from it has been incredible and not obviously to the human eye, machine generated. Also, you can tell it to adopt a persona. So if you could at some point, and I don't think you can do this with ChatGPT, but perhaps you will in the future with productized AIs around this, to adopt a persona, to adopt, and that persona is kind of how you present your game, or the flavor. It might work. I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
It might work, I don't
Anyways,
know.
Elad, this has been super interesting,
Yeah.
and super relevant. Maybe let's end at the beginning. As we started, and I started asking about scaling and growing, you said you skipped the hard part.
Yeah.
Talk briefly about
Yeah,
the
you
hard part
jumped
of
to
creating a
like
great
you
game.
already built Westworld and you still
Exactly, it's perfect. Clash of Clans, here you go, in your lap. Market it.
Yeah, yeah, you already built, yeah, yeah, the initial work is insane, and most of the game studios do it wrong. And in a way, we work on data and live ops, but we constantly educate our clients to do things the right way. Go with this, go with singular, not with the beep. No, there's a lot of things like that. Sometimes they love, like kids, they need to do their mistakes by themselves to learn. But some of them will listen and say, you know what, you guys work with tens of games all over the industry. We're cross-platform. We do everything from mobile to PC, web, Roblox, Minecraft games, and Web3. So we see everything all over. We have a really like wide view of all the types of games and genres and stuff. So some tools we know that fit better for different uses, and if you use the right tools and build, like, go the right path, then yes, then the it's easier, at least, than it used to be in the past, because building companies and building products became easier, way easier, and require less budget than it used to, if you look back 15-20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And yet there's so much out there, and it's so noisy in the market. There's so many games and apps being released every single day. Even building something amazing, there's no guarantee that it'll make a dent in the universe, as Steve Jobs used to say. Anyways, Elad, this has been a lot of fun and super enjoyable. Thank you for joining us on Growth
Thank you, John.
Masterminds.
That was great. Thank you. Take care.